welcome to the VFS speaking event, presenting two esteemed members of the interactive audio community who work at Larian Studios in Quebec City. We're very pleased to have Danny Kogan, technical sound designer, and Giorgio Vizzini, audio lead, here with us today to talk about all things game audio or interactive audio. It's kind of expanding, I would say. So to get started with, just to give you a rundown of the format, we're going to start off with the first part of the talk today, having a converse for about 20 minutes. We're going to talk about a few things between myself, Greg, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg Robertson. I'm the senior game audio instructor here at BFS. So we're going to have a little conversation about things game audio, and we're going to get to know these two guys here. And then, as you notice, you also have a question and answer box here, along with the chat. What you want to do is, if you have any questions, don't raise your hand with an emoji or anything like that. Put your questions in the question and answer box, and we will answer any questions. But we are going to start the questioning after the first introductory discussion and getting to know you phase here. Without further ado, let's get to know these guys. First off, Danny, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Larian Studios in Quebec City.
So, hi, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for doing this. My name is Danny Kogan. I'm the technical sound designer at Larian. And what I do, I live in the middle ground between sound, code, and game design. I make the sound systems that interact with the gameplay and interact with the sounds. So not as much focused on asset creation, more on the design piece and systemic. Like I mainly live inside our middleware, our code base, and inside our engine, and kind of being the bridge between the teams.
All right, that's awesome. And technical sound design is definitely becoming more of a specialization, I would say. That's a trend that I've noticed too. So it's going to be great to hear what you have to say about that. So thank you very much for being here. Next up, we have, next but not least, Giorgio Vizzini, the audio lead at Larian Studios. Welcome, Giorgio.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having us. I'm Giorgio Vizzini, lead at Larian Studios. My role here is mainly to be a facilitator and a communicator between departments and ensuring that the workflows and the pipelines are in check, efficient, and making sure also that the audio direction vision is put in place and keeping giving nudges to the boat to be always on track.
Nice. Okay, so I guess my first question to open things up here is, how would you describe the working relationship between your two roles on any given project? So I noticed in your bio here you listed Baldur's Gate 3 and Divinity Fallen Heroes. Did you both work on that project together? And how did that work in terms of your respective roles?
So I was always.
Please go, Danny.
So I was always I was always saying like with like the differentiation, for example, from the technical side and from like the sound and the direction side is usually the what and the how. So it's like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do this, or we have this kind of thing that like we want to achieve, and then it's up to figure out how we're gonna do it, what's the best way to do it, what's the most efficient way to do it, and of course, like on the pipelines, a lot of the time is saving people's time. Like I am a big believer, if something is being done manually more than 5 times, you can automate it. You can write a script that will do it. Like I'm allergic to manual work, so it's it's if I see someone's doing something manually too much, I'm like, okay, like let's try to deconstruct it to see if it can become a process, a pipeline, or a script.
Awesome. Thank you. And what did you do, Giorgio? Did you just go, that's awesome, or?
Well, to be fair with all the team, they make my job really, really easy in the sense that they're uber talented and they're so proactive that they bring so much to the table that I really have the cool thing is that I really have this plethora of ideas, this plethora of methods, and this plethora of suggestions that allows me to cherry pick the good ones to make sure that everything is in place. The thing is that for me and Danny is the first game. I joined the team after already, I would say, practically a couple of years of Baldur's Gate already in place. So it's our first game. One thing that I love about Danny is that his mindset of automation is exactly the same that I have. In previous jobs, I was in his same situation where I was always looking around for colleagues, like and trying to figure out, look, I think that this one we're losing a little bit of time. Let's figure out a way to speed it up. So every time I know that is bringing something to the table, I know that it's going to be in my cup of tea. So that's crazy. That's good.
So are you, Giorgio, focused more on the content? And I guess what I'm also alluding to is that, it takes a village to make a game, as they say. Is that you obviously have other people on your team, and so what does a typical game team look like at Larian Studios?
We are a bunch of people at the moment. We are 9 people plus some helpers. So we have, of course, production. We have some specialists in QA. We have a few people specialized in different ownerships that we currently have. So we have the ownership of ambience. We have the ownership of spells, creatures. What the typical day, I would say, at Larian is at the moment is during the production itself. So we already know what the goal is making sure at the very beginning of the day that there are no blockers. Otherwise, we unleash our producer. If there already are some bugs that have been flagged, our QA people will just chime in and will allow us to know those before we even start the day so that we already know what are the highest priority for the day. And after that, it's all about ensuring that the sprints that we have already planned with the team has no blockers. Once this is done, I would say it's a green light for me at the beginning with the Scrum. We check that everything is okay, that the team is okay. We start the day. Every time there is something that needs to be spoken, especially in this pandemic moment where we have worked a lot remotely, it's more communication and conversation has been really, really key. Every time there was something, just raise the hand, post a message in the channel of the team, ensuring that everybody's always on the same page. If there is a problem, there is a little bit of a think tank, ensuring that we can see that from different angles. If something is not entirely audio department related, we of course expand and bounce this question to those that own that type of question. And once all these, I would say, a little bit of red tape is done, there's when the day starts and the magic happens, and people create assets, and people create fantastic tools, fantastic ways for implementing and tools to implement stuff, and features for the game, and that's it.
I think one of Larian's strengths is the fact that it's there's so many studios around the world, so it's like very like there's always someone working on the game. Well, the sound team is mainly focused in Quebec, but we have sound people in Dublin. We have another sound designer in Norway, and in Georgia now is in Italy. So it's like everyone is dispersed. Like usually Georgia with us in Quebec, but the cool thing about it is there's always someone someone up or someone to look at the game, someone to talk to. And that's, I think, like also having so many different people from so many different places, I think that's also a big strength in the voices that you hear and all the feedback and how the game is created around the production overall.
That's awesome. So one thing, you guys have audio QA, which is a luxury in my experience.
We do have Vasily in St. Petersburg. He is definitely our resource when it comes to everything that is audio. He is on the side is also a sound designer, so that allows us also to have a very direct type of conversation with him, which is always nice. It makes our job much easier whenever there is a language connector, even between different departments, and speaking at a higher level of abstraction when it comes to specific terms or focusing on specific problems. It is indeed a luxury.
Oh yeah, I've asked that at other companies, generally smaller to mid-sized companies, and they'll say, "Well, Joe plays in a band; he can do audio QA." And my first question there is it a good band? So you also talked about having scrums. As far as, so you clearly are working in an agile way with that model, and that's awesome. That is the way of the world, especially because we are developing software. We're not making movies. So how does that agile process work for you guys as an audio team in working with the game designers on a project?
I would actually give this to Danny, because he is a little bit of a jolly here, because he has worked on both sides of the fence. So
yeah, like I started my work like my role in design. So it's like both of those worlds are very close to me. As an agile development, it's like of course splitting up for sprints, and kind of like, okay, defining each sprint what we want to achieve. Like from the start of the project, we always want to achieve more than what we can. and it's improving, but like in any software development, you give estimates that like then things happen along the way, and things change, and things and the iterative process of design is causing a lot of iteration, and basically a kind of a producer nightmare. But yeah, it's basically the collaborative spirit in design. It's the optimal workflow of a feature would be designing the feature, getting the gameplay system, designing the sound system behind it, designing the feature. Okay, then breaking it down to all the assets. Okay, this is all the assets that we need for this system to come online. Then the system gets implemented, and the minute it gets implemented, implemented, starts the iteration process. And then usually it's never right from the first time. So usually there's like a couple of iterations going on, tweaking. Of course, part of it is mixing, and then when the system is ready, making a documentation of the entire system, and then handing it down to QA to get like the testing sheet, and like for the audio QA to break it down into all the elements and how to test it, for everyone to be able to test the system, because things always break when you don't look. That's the but the hard part in here, and I think this is like globally about like in a lot of creative endeavors, and I think especially in sound and music, is to know when the feature is done, to know when something is finished, because you can keep iterating forever, and like, oh yeah, it can always be better, but that's why like it's very hard to know like when something is done and needs to be documented and move to the finalization stage, and when something is still in iteration. So
yeah, I've always liked this this thing. He had this quote about making albums. When he was asked, "How do you know when you're done?" He goes, "You don't. You just stop." I'm sure I don't know anybody I've ever worked with over the years that has ever shipped a game that didn't have bugs either, right? It's just about how small they are, or how little they are, so that's interesting.
The way I approach it is kind of like cooking. So when you're cooking a dish, you're like, when you're on the final stage, so you cut the ingredients, you prepare the dish, you have the recipe, then you put everything together, and then comes the point of spicing it up, like putting the spices. So you put the spices and you taste. You put the spices and you taste. The minute you taste it 3 times without adding or changing any of the spices, you stop tasting, now you're eating. So you're done.
I love that. Can I steal that one from you?
Sure.
That's perfect. I love that. That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of tools that you guys use. One of the things that all the audio a lot of the education and training of VFS audio students with game audio is learning the tools. And, that can be daunting considering how fast they change too. So what sort of audio tools are you using in terms of, say, middleware, game engine, and any proprietary tools that you're using? And of course, if you want to talk about scripting languages that you may or may not be using, that would be awesome.
Well, we're using Wise as a middleware. The engine is proprietary. And we do have a lot of under the hood type of scripting languages. Actually, Danny again can go more in details. If there's no red dot of a sniper shooting us, revealing secrets, I think that we can actually delve into those as well a little bit. But in regards to learning the tools and I would say the daunting challenge of keeping up with those tools, I would say that the real way to avoid being daunted by those kind of changes is ensuring that the elements why the tool is existing, it's practically arriving to the point where the tool is not a series of action that you have to do to make some changes, to make some decision, but understanding why the tool is there in the first place. Then if the tool changes, if the UI changes, if new features are added, just having that kind of personal compass that allows you to know, okay, Wise allows us to do this kind of stuff, this realm of opportunities. Our engine is used to evaluate this kind of problem and solve these kind of problems. And then anything that changes, even proprietary tools that are not created for a broad public, but are created especially for some specific stuff, just knowing the big whys behind those will allow you to eventually just keep up very, very easily when those things are changing.
Also, we have the old Reaper fiasco.
The Reaper fiasco? Do tell.
No, well, the thing is, like, before the sound team was mainly using Nuendo. But there was like a complete change in the sound team, and like with that also came a change of DAWs, and everyone is using Reaper, which I'm a big fan of, because you can write custom scripts and you can customize it very easily, and it's all in Lua. Like, it can use Lua, which is also like part of the gameplay scripting language that is based on. So that's really nice. And of course, there's always the biblical discussion of like Pro Tools and Reaper. We have a sound designer that came from our cinematic sound designer swears by Pro Tools, and we always joke around and basically have like that same religious discussion of like which DAW to use. In sense of the scripts and and the tools, a lot of the tools that are like being used like under the hood is like there's WAPI, of course, that is super useful into automating things. And right now on the scripting language, I think there's Ruby, JavaScript, Lua, and Python that is like used for very, very, very specific stuff. But it's all just like it's all unique things of like unique utilities. The rudimentary is mainly Lua and JavaScript for WAPI. Like
that's awesome. So I do want to. I will admit I haven't spent a lot of time with Reaper, and I've always also understood that Pro Tools does not, as far as choosing the weapon for the fight, for multimedia stuff and massive amounts of files and batch processing and things like that, is not the same. However, Pro Tools is something that, when you're dealing with external studios, say for localization and things like that, you're more likely to get them something in a Pro Tools session than some other things. However, Reaper is becoming more and more prolific. So how does that affect you? I mean, you're a large studio. Do you ever have to get things from, especially with localized dialogue content, from other studios? And what format do you get it in?
Actually, we have a little bit of a lack in that term that we have practically everything is internal. So this allows us practically to shape our internal pipeline the way that we want it. And the moment we decided to roll with Reaper, it was a decision that was dictated mostly by the fact that, again, it can be extended. We have a lot of internal tools. We have a lot of custom tools. The possibility to connect tools one after the other, again, will allow us to automate some stuff and making sure that we're avoiding a lot of human error, a lot of passages. It's extremely powerful tool for us. Pro Tools, indeed, for video stuff is still going very strongly. It has some connectors with Adobe Suits and other video programs that Reaper does not have. At the moment, for us, is not impacting in any way, in the sense that, again, we have this incredible luck to develop practically all of our content internally, and we can kind of decide our weapons of choice. We totally choose Reaper for the flexibility that it allowed us, even though, yes, every now and then it shows some of the nasty sides of Reaper. Very, very big sessions sometimes crash mysteriously and never open again. And so you have to revert back a little bit. But when you do these kind of choices, these long-term choices, especially, you really put a lot of elements on the table and you do a very thorough examination of the pros and cons, huge list of pros and cons. And in the very end, Reaper just was the winner because there was so many opportunities and so much scalability that was open in front of us that allowed us to not only improve our current workflow, but just to start and looking at the next steps already.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, I guess $150 versus the cost of Pro Tools and everything, that probably helps too, right? Especially if you have a lot of studios.
We have this new new thing that we introduced recently in the team, that on Fridays we kind of like all sit together and do like a show and tell. And it's kind of, instead of the normal Scrum, would take a little bit more time, and everyone is just showing what they're like currently looking at, like what your current task, not the plan for today, what you're staring at right now. And usually it's like it's the problems that like you're facing, and we learned from that there's like a lot of knowledge sharing that is being facilitated, and like I'm enjoying those greatly personally. And I remember when like one of the times when like the cinematic sound designer showed this template for Pro Tools, and like how the template works for like all the routing and stuff, and my mind was blown. I'm like, wow, okay, like it's super robust and super complex. The thing is, I think it's possible to get the same thing in repo, but I think it's just like visually probably a little bit less intuitive, unfortunately. But
yeah, I think the scripting and the batch processing are definitely a win in multimedia, though, for sure.
That's the realm I live in, so so for me that's a huge plus.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so I think we're just past I think we should start. Maybe Max, you can confirm now would be a good time to actually open things up for Q&A. And who knows where that will go. There's a lot of great questions I see already up here. All right. Awesome, guys. This has been great so far. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm just going to start at the top. Okay. Alexis Salvador Frias Arias. Can Danny give an example of the automation versus manual workflow?
Well, the easiest example is, for example, dragging assets in Wise into containers. Like when developing like big systems, like usually that's hundreds and hundreds of assets, and like manually putting those in Wise, setting the switch, setting it to be looping if it needs to be looping, setting it to streaming if it needs to be streaming, and like all of that is very time consuming. So all of that can be automated. And overall I found like a lot of work with like sound assets, and overall I think even like overall it does like overall with any design principle, any data manipulation has a lot of Excel, like usually Excel involvement, or like any kind of data management, and those kind of things can be automated. If you're changing a value or doing any repetitive action more than 5 times, probably there's a way to automate it, like or inside of software you're using, or with like a macro recorder, or like if it's Excel, some VBA and some Excel macros, or any other way. Google Sheets also have some stuff, although it tends to break if you stress it too much. Like it really doesn't like big data. Well, it's not designed for it, but yeah, but basically I think like the easiest example is importing stuff into Wise. That's a step that can be easily automated for majority of systems.
And just to clarify, you say you use Excel a lot, and the macros in Excel to so I guess affecting the multi import function on the settings?
Not really. The Excel that I use is mainly for data verification with the game engine. So I can get an export of all the sound triggers in the game, or for example, before a patch or before a release, getting every single sound implemented in the game and double check that like the connection with the sound engine is not broken. So the sound resources are intact, everything is working, and there's like no like trash data or like some things that got broken along the way. So big data manipulation I do in Excel because I'm really comfortable in it, and it's a great way to run those queries and check those kind of things.
Very cool. Thank you. So next up we have Jan Jocelyn. How much programming is involved in your work as a technical sound designer, and what language do you work in? So I guess this one's for you again, Danny.
So this is really depends on the studio, because I think like kind of technical sound designer is kind of like the like it's being more and more accepted as like something like inside a studio, and kind of each studio has its own little definition about what it means. In regards of the programming, I think it really depends on the engine. On the day to day, I do touch our engine, and I do code a little bit in C++, and getting more and more like before was doing a lot of C#, and now like in transition to be fully in C++. And a lot of it is also script building, Lua, JavaScript, Ruby, Python. I think in a day I can jump between those five, 6 languages interchangeably depends on the task. So it really depends what I do. Sometimes there'll be like a whole week I'm sitting on C++. Sometimes like a whole week I'm sitting on only Ruby and Python, and it really depends on the task at hand.
Very cool. Thank you. That was great. Okay, next up we have Christopher Mariani. Would you know of a good way of getting into audio QA? Let's give this one to Giorgio.
A good way for audio QA? That's a very good question, especially because QA, I think, is one of those departments in Game Studio that is getting more and more specialized. All the other departments have seen this already happening, but the more we are giving importance to QA, the more we are giving this kind of power to them to be more focused and more nuanced and be more knowledgeable in the things that they're checking, and improving the overall iteration just so much. And being a good audio QA for me is first and foremost being able to talk with the language of sound designers. So not coming with, I will always remember in one game I had a Jira that was a sound problem. And that was the description of the Jira, and it was a lot of time ago. Definitely not a Larian, but it was like there is a sound problem here, and there was a video, and that video was 15 minutes long, and it was pretty kind of impossible for us to understand what was going wrong. But sometimes you get something like there is noise, but maybe there is a specific way to addressing that type of noise, which allow even sound designer to immediately know not only where to look for, but already, okay, I know why this is, I know where to go. So to give an example, in VO, when you're listening to the VO that we have recorded, knowing a difference between this file is clipped, is distorted, is saturated, there is a tongue click, there is a pop, there is a nose noise. There is a lot of stuff that by just knowing what they are, and by also maybe even knowing how to fix those, will allow you to speed the iteration from figuring out the problem and even being even more knowledgeable and more granular in figuring out these kind of problems, expressing the problem into a Jira, describing this problem to the rest of the team, and allowing them to be laser focused on the problem, and not, okay, there is a problem, let's analyze it, let's see what this is, let's see how to solve it. On audio QA, an extremely good audio QA will give you a Jira bug, will give you a bug report that allows you to do this analysis, location, and even part of the solution all in one small description. And that is what is a good audio QA is. And how for getting into audio QA, just be and desire to be a great QA member, which is I think the most important role that we have in video game.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think QA in some ways are the unsung heroes of game development.
Totally.
And as we mentioned in the beginning of the talk, how I've mentioned that audio QA is often a luxury at places you may work. But if you can, if you can get some audio QA or even explain some of the things that you just talked about to people so they know what to identify. So it's not like there's something doesn't sound right. Okay, that's not going to help you, right? Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. So what I'm going to do here, folks, is I know some of you are on your second question I can see here, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance here to pipe in and answer questions. So, and then I'll start looking at seconds. How about that? So let's look at, next up, we have Conrad Plagini. I don't know if I pronounced that right, and I apologize in advance. Do you guys ever get so sick of a game you're working on that you don't even want to play it once it's complete? That's a good one.
It's like going into game design. I had this fear that I was like, oh, what if the minute I know how games are being made and I see everything behind it, I will not like it anymore. I will not be able to enjoy games anymore. But that's not the case. Like for example, on Baldur's Gate 3, like we were working very hard to get the early access out the door, and we're working very intensely, like day in day out. And on the day that we released early access, I remember it was the weekend. It was like and like we had kind of like, okay, this is the weekend off. I went back home and I was playing the game with my friends, like that could buy it on Steam. Like we were playing together all weekend. So I think it really depends on the game and like what you work on personally. I really love the games that we make, and like I really enjoy them. So no, I don't get sick of them, because it's different experience when you're working on something. You just see all the problems, and when you lay back, and like usually I really enjoy having the experience with someone that doesn't know the game. So kind of I'm re-experiencing the game from their eyes, and like they're paying attention of things that I take for granted or things that I don't pay attention to. And of course there's the occasional like, oh, okay, we should fix this. And it's like, yeah, but but usually I try to have the different seats and like the different hats between as a player and as a developer. But the mind will still keep working, and you'll still be identifying those things. But the enjoyment,
I just find that because I'm using cheat codes to test things all the time, I end up really sucking at the game. That's what I find.
But I would like also to add that what might be one of the reasons why someone would not like to play their own video game is also what's happening in terms of development, maybe even crunch. You know, there's a lot of feeling that you attach to the game and that are not just game related, but there are work related, that are colleagues related. So if you have a very good culture like Larian does, I think that it's not really possible to not love the game that you're doing to the point that you are even able to switch mindset. Like there's always the case where, you know, audio people go and watch a film and they never watch the film. They just, oh, look how they did this creature or this work. But I really think that when you're so deep and so in love with what you're doing, eventually, while you still have the ability to dissect it to the very core, you can also arrive to the point where you become a little more zen and switch that part off and just play the game. And suck it because you're used to use cheats, but again, you know, it's you can really love it.
Those are great answers.
Really, it really depends on the cycle. Really depends on the production. On those two, I had to take a step back after I could not jump right in. But on BG3 could not get enough.
I find the same thing with writing music, actually. You know, I spent a lot of time, and then I can't listen to anything I've done until like a little while later. Great question. I always admire getting, you know, and think about QA, testing games all day. And then I always remember when I first started at Radical Entertainment, the QA guys hanging around and playing games after testing games all day. So interesting. Okay, next up we have John Weideman. What is an example of what a technical sound designer is responsible for and what an audio programmer is responsible for at Larian?
So yeah, we're actually lucky to also have an audio programmer on board. That's the differentiation is usually like the technical sound designer is more living on the middleware, and on the engine it's usually like all the like how the sound is triggered, like kind of like more on the gameplay side, like hooking up the events, setting up the RTPCs, the switches, how all the engine talks, basically how the engine talks with the systems inside Wise, and how the systems inside Wise talk to gameplay and talk to the design and all of this, while the audio programmer is mainly on the engine side and more technically advanced features. Like a good example would be like occlusion and I cannot like there's like multiple different aspects that are like more embedded in the engine, or like deeper in the gameplay code that like requires big systemic refactoring and overall like programming flow. So hope that answers the question.
Are you guys using your own proprietary game engine or using Unity or Unreal?
It's our own engine, written in C++. So yeah, like any diving into the engine, it's all in C++. I really like the fact that we're using our own engine, because like you have a lot more flexibility, you have a lot more freedom, and things like things are like less rigid in that sense. And also like before I was using Unity, and like after diving into C++, I had to return to C# for a global game jam, and it was very difficult.
Well, C++ is definitely a deeper language. And yeah, I mean, you're, as a large company, you have the luxury of being able to have the resources to make your own game engine too, right? So, I mean, that's something. And this, when the first 10 years I worked in games, there was no such thing as Unity or Unreal or anything like that. Okay.
Definitely pluses and minuses to having your own engine and versus working with like already an existing engine, because of course like an existing engine is already proven multiple times, and it's very versatile. You can do a lot of different types of games. It's like very broad. The features are very are there to serve a plateau of games. While at Larian we make RPGs, and like the engine is designed to make those type of games and designed to make those type of experiences. Mm-hmm. And this is the way I view the kind of like the difference.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That really does. And yeah, I've actually worked on one project where they did actually run into a bit of a wall with Unity because of things they wanted to do, yet as open as something like Unity can be, it's still made to be a generalized product.
Yep. I love Unity to start games, but I like to finalize a game. To finish a game in Unity it can be difficult without tuning it to your needs.
Great question, John, and great answer. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have Aaron Campbell. Question for both guests. What is your favorite aspect and the most challenging aspects of your roles?
I would say that they are the same. Both my favorite is the most challenging, which is the navigating through the boundaries to get an answer to the problem that we are facing. As designers, we do have a lot of boundaries that come from a creative vision, some limitation, some technical limitation, some artistic limitation, and making sure that all those are taken into consideration and are then shaped into what is our answer, what is one of the solutions that we want to propose, is, I would say, the most challenging task. At the same time, that's what I love about game development. It's choral kind of endeavor, and not only there is this lateral thinking and problem solving kind of aspect, but the fact that there are a lot of people involved in that endeavor is what makes me love it. It's super challenging. At the same time, every time you there is this buildup of people and thinking and problem solving minds clashing together, and every time that you just jump on the next hurdle, you see what you have just overcome, and it's just so it's just so fulfilling. And then you have the next one, and then you have the next one, and again. And those are always usually the more you go, the more there is an abstract level that rises. You start with core problems, and then you go in deeper challenges, more complex challenges that are built on your previous decisions, and that makes also the weight on every single decision so important. And that's why I love that kind of challenge. I really love it.
For me, there's like two aspects. There's like the kind of the technical aspect, which is the problem solving aspect. Kind of like we'll, in the team, we'll come up with something crazy, and there's like, no, like we cannot do it, but wait, can we? And then like encountering those problems and solving them. And sometimes it takes a couple of iterations to solve those kind of problems, and a couple of iterations to find something that works. And on a personal, like on a more personal human level, it's like the passion around the project, around the team, around the people, and passion is contagious. And like the minute you have that passion running, it's like it's really invigorating to work. But the challenging part is too much passion will consume you, and like to know how to balance that, and how to balance the passion with your well-being, and like with yourself. So definitely, like, favorite aspect in game development is the passion around the project and the problem solving aspects.
Awesome. Great answers and a great question. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Luke Young, and he says, thanks so much for being here, guys. Again, thank you so much for being here, guys. And thank you, Luke, for saying that.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
His question is, were there any interesting hurdles or challenges you had to overcome or are still working on that are specific to working on an early access game?
I would say the release curses. Like every single time we're approaching any kind of important milestone, whether it's an internal or an external milestone, there is something that nobody can ever foresee that happens. Flooding, internet cables being destroyed by sharks in the depth of the sea. There's always something that is so big and so impactful to the whole production. Like genuinely, getting the whole studio, or pandemic. So there are all this kind of stuff that every now and then happens, and usually we joke about that, but it kind of seems, statistically speaking, that the moment we are really approaching some sort of deadline, there is always something so incredible that is happening.
Yeah.
The Larian curse.
Yeah, indeed.
I think it's an industry curse, personally. Yeah, that's my experience.
It is.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Danny?
Yeah, like one of the things that, like, being in early access, you kind of always need to have the game done in a way, like in a complete functional way. So any big restructures, any big overhaul, any big systemic changes, the minute you the minute you have a patch released, you need to wait. Like you need to wait before and after, after a patch or before a version goes live. You need to find a good time frame to do those kind of changes, because you may break the main game, and you may release something that is broken to the public. So you need to make sure that there's enough time to test it. If there was no early access, then you'll be doing those changes, those big systemic changes on the fly, and just and roll with them. So I think that's the biggest challenge on being in early access. You always need to upkeep a complete working game, a complete functional game, and and be more mindful when doing those kind of big systemic changes.
I would also like to add, because Danny already mentioned that one of the important things is knowing when to stop. And when you have a big release, when you have a big milestone, that is a very important thing. And I think that all the directors is if I'm bouncing the question from what was challenging our roles and bouncing to what is challenging for directors, is managing the expectation on one side for the players, on another side for what they have, their vision of the game is, and also for what is from the internal side. So the good thing about having proactive people and extremely talented people is that they will bring so much to the table. Sometimes directors and sometimes even leads have to kind of stop that, and knowing where is the fine balance between what will be the perfect moment to stop it, that it's so challenging.
I would agree. Thank you very much for that question. Next up, there's a couple of questions here talking about game engine. To clarify, Larian uses their own proprietary game engine, so I don't think we need to dive into that. But this next question here is from Jared Perkins. How important is it for aspiring interactive sound designers to learn C++, C#, or other similar languages? This is a great question.
It's a very good question. So the thing is, and also like going back to like the other question about the programming language, I don't think first of all, knowing a programming language cannot hurt. I think it's like in today's world, it's a plus either way. But I don't think like being fixated on a specific language, if it's this or that or any kind of language, I don't think it really matters. At the end of the day, like all code is logic, and the thing is, starting with any language and to be able to create those algorithms, solve the problems with that logical constraints, and like with that logic is gonna translate to any language. So to a point that like the only thing you need to know is Google the syntax. Like syntax, like C++ is a little bit different in that sense because it does a little bit more. You need to a little bit know what's happening behind it. But you can also do that. Like you can also go to those depths of thinking in Java. So like any specific language is not that important. How important it is to know a programming language. So it really depends on what you use it for. So for sound design, I think if you're using Reaper, I think it's useful to know Lua. If you're using Wise, it's useful to know WAPI. Any implementation of WAPI that can be or in Lua or in JavaScript or in any other language. But basically, it really depends on the use. It really depends on the level. Is it like an absolute must? I would like for a sound design, I would say no, but it is useful. It is definitely useful.
I think it's useful to have an understanding of it and have at the very minimum have some experience with it, so you can at least have conversations with people that are programmers or technical sound designers, and talk the same language. I think that's a very important aspect of it, because it's no longer a case where content creators are simply throwing content over the fence, so to speak, to programmers or technical sound designers, etc., to implement.
It's just imagining you're sitting in Reaper and then you look through the actions and you're like, wow, I wish it was doing this. And then you can just add it yourself. You're like, okay, it does it now.
Yeah, and more, especially with visual scripting tools, it's becoming easier to do stuff like that. And that seems to be a trend that's happening across the board. I also, to talk about what you said about syntax, one thing I've noticed over the years is that the syntax for different languages is similar, because especially in object-oriented languages, is because they actually have to perform the same types of functions. So there are eccentricities and differences, like you said, with C++, but there are a lot of similarities. It's not like, learning Mandarin and French or something like that.
Yes, but I think why the programming languages are similar is a product of how language works, and basically to be able to logic. So in the end, there's only one way to logic. Is like an if is an if.
Yep.
Like you can have whatever symbol you want for it, but as a logic operation, it will always be the logic operation.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. Okay, great question. You guys, great questions from everybody so far. And like I said, I see there's some people on their second question here, but I want to make sure that I'm giving everybody at least one chance to ask these guys some questions here. And again, thank you so much. We're so grateful that you can talk with us here today. This next question up is from Jan Jocelyn. What type of experience or skill sets are you looking for when you're looking for a new technical sound designer?
A key point is like ability to solve problems, self-educate, and to be able to maintain and establish different workflow and systems, to be able to create, maintain, and establish a system. How and which languages, that's less of a focus in my opinion. The more important thing is really all of those. And of course, on the sound part, I think any person in the sound team being from QA, any person dealing with sound from QA and otherwise, developing a critical listening, and that's also takes quite a bit of time.
Also, when we are talking about new hiring, so I imagine also we are talking about interns or juniors. The experience or skill set, of course, it gives you leverage, but attitude, personality, good manners, those are things that goes really a long way. If we are seeing a potential for a person to join the team and being part of a good team, being a good team member with this potential, this diamond in the rough that can be developed together with the company, that usually is much more important when we're looking for new people in intern or junior positions. A little bit of talent, of course, is never a bad thing, and again, experience, skill set. But there is a friend of mine. He is a biologist, and he recently applied for a studio that does interactive installation. And he knows a little bit of programming, and he knows a little bit of technical stuff in general, and he applied for a programming position in that studio. But the fact that he was able to see problems from a different kind of perspective that he learned while becoming a scientist, that what sold him. So it's all about who you are. It's all about how we can see your development potential.
As a segue from that, can you tell us what kind of work that you would generally give a starting junior sound person on your team when they first start? What kinds of tasks do you give to them?
Sound designer, I would say anything. Maybe not something that is crucial for the game. Maybe even something that has already been done in the game, or something that they can reference to, so that they can not only, I would say, learn the tools of the trade, but also start crafting the designer mindset, where it's not about artistry only, but it's really about design. So there is a vision that has already been set. So it's not about your capabilities of creating an incredibly good spell, but it's your ability to shape your incredibly good spell chops into the vision, analyzing that, dissecting that. So I would even say that's something that has already been done, and say, look, we have already done that, but redo it. Like literally this creature, we have done that, but redo it. So use different, go from a different perspective, try something new, but at the same time, show us that you can dissect something and make sure that those elements are in the right place. Then if it's boomy, if it's too loud, the mastering is not perfect, some fades are not correct, that's not a problem. It's more of a starting to shape things in place, and together with improving your skills as a sound person, also as a designer, that with design really being the key.
Cool. Awesome. I think that might have even answered Luke Young's question about spells a little bit there.
Well, we would need Victor here. He is our spell guy, and even Frank. By the way, Frank comes from VFS, so yes, he is.
I believe
recently
Danny,
joined us.
You went to VFS.
Danny, yes, Danny, of course. But Frank was one of our last acquisition in the team, and it was incredibly humbling seeing his show reel. That I was just blown away. He was applying for the position, and I was he's not a junior, but I think that I think that at VFS you do a little bit of magic with people. Every time that we have the possibility to catch up on some stuff that people from VFS has done, it's just crazy. And Frank blows away. But Frank and Victor are currently working on spells. They might get very much more into detail. If we might even relay the question to get an extra detailed answer, I would say, because it really deserve that kind of a good answer that we cannot give.
Like what I can tell you is that like the spell system went a lot of iterations, and a lot of iterations, and then what Victor is doing with the spells is.
There is one thing though, actually there's one thing about source content or organic recordings. One thing that we are moving towards is to get much more and more original content. We have a creature and foley and librarian guy in Norway, that he's Glenn. He creates a tremendous amount of assets for the entirety of the people. He's already training both Frank and Robin, our two people in our team, to become and to progress in this kind of paradigm, to try as much as possible to not rely on third-party libraries, simply because you can change those as much as you want. But I've already seen that happening again and again, talking with other people in the trade, and they see that, for this incredible thing, one of the 25 layers that you've put into this incredible sound is this sound, and they can pinpoint it with some incredible precision. But by doing everything from scratch, there are two positive things. First of all, novelty, but at the same time, it's an extra element and an extra weapon in your direction, in your artistic direction. Recording something in a specific way will allow everything to be shaped in that way. Everything will glue better together. Everything will have their own style. There are some very important examples in the gaming industry where they were reamping sounds by using human skulls as resonant stuff, and then putting a contact microphone to re-record it again. So all this kind of stuff, all this kind of either processing or source creation is tremendously important.
Oh yeah, huge. So that also can sound like a unfathomably huge undertaking to do this. So here's a question from Andrew Jordan to sort of put that in perspective. How long does it normally take to complete all the sound work for one of your games? Recording, editing, implementation, et cetera, et cetera.
All the sound work. All of it.
Yeah, well, what's your average dev cycle for a game of the scope of, say, Baldur's Gate 3 or Divinity Fallen Heroes?
The very first moment of pre-production to the very last second before data log for the gold for the master, it
never stops.
it really never stops, but it depends. It's generally we all have different experience in different games, but genuinely is X is the number of years that requires the game to be done. X is the amount of hours spent on audio, starting from the pre-production, the development of the systems, starting creating assets, implementing those, scratching everything away, restarting from scratch, and again and again. So it's honestly, it's we don't really have a very good answer, to be fair.
But yeah. But what I can say to Andrew is, like, for example, games of game of this kind of scope, like when you're approaching like a scope that is so big, usually what the approach that we take here is initially creating a generic system, that like covers 100% of the cases. So like be it by like material weights and like taking like all the generics. So then anything else that is being added down the line, changes, you don't care. It already has sound. It's already there. And then like, so that's 80% of the sound usually coming from that. And the system needs to be flexible enough that it allows for unique assets, like where it's needed, because you always want to have stuff unique, because if everything sounds generic, then it's really not interesting. So
how does that relate to, so Baldur's Gate 3, obviously there's a Baldur's Gate 2 and a Baldur's Gate 1. How much of the sound from previous titles in a franchise like that ends up getting reused in subsequent titles, or do you record everything, redo everything from scratch? And that would also include any, your systems as well, I would think.
So we didn't develop Baldur's Gate 2 or 1. So like we and also they were made 20 years before. So like a lot of the sounds is a little bit outdated. But for example, moving from Divinity Original Sin 2 to Baldur's Gate, we actually scrapped the entire Wise project. We started from scratch, from the ground up, because and we have 0 assets reused from the previous games. We made everything first, because we felt it's a different universe, it's a different game, needs to have its own sound.
Yeah, I think that's especially, I mean, there are a lot of franchises, especially when you work at a larger company too, right? So it's a very important point, I think. So yeah, I'm just checking on the time. So we're a little over an hour in here. So I'm thinking we can, how are you guys feeling? Can you answer a few more questions, or?
Of course.
Yeah, I have
of course.
A couple more in me.
Okay. Yeah, we don't want to work you to death. We want you to come back. Okay. I'm just trying to see what other questions here.
I see a question is like, do we play D&D for research for Baldur's Gate 3? And they're like, before, well, you're asking it in a very funky time. But before, there used to be there's still D&D sessions going on in the studio, and also Baldur's Gate 3 being the continuation of Descent to Avernus. So there was a lot of groups running that. Before we used to have D&D sessions like in the office, but now with like COVID and the situation, it kind of everything moved online.
Okay, how about this? This is a good general question, I think, for both of you. As an audio lead or a technical sound designer, what challenges and blockers do you prepare for and encounter, and how do you recommend then to minimize their impact on the project?
That's an extremely good question. So anything that we have already faced is something that we are kind of prepared of. The complexity of game development make it that one tiny, the butterfly effect in game development runs really strong. So even if you have faced exactly the same problem, just a change in the gears, just a little bit of sand in the cogs will require you to tweak your answer. There is not an answer that will work 100% if repurposed in a different scenario, I would say. But to minimize their impact on the project, I would say that communication is key, and making sure that everything is in the open, that all the departments or the owners are aware of what is happening, what the challenges might be, what the blockers might be. So more than being prepared, as a general rule, is ensuring that the moment something pops up, you're immediately able to act on it and communicate it, and making a schedule and figuring out possibility to solve it.
So just to clarify, when you say owners, do you mean like the stakeholders in the various departments, animation and that, or are you talking about the product
yes,
manager?
Sometimes overflow of information, like over information might be actually a problem, so that you are overcrowding every people's feeds with a lot of information and they might miss some very important stuff. So it's very important to know where to go, which person to ask to come in and think tank something. At the same time, those information, while immediately directed to the correct people, should be available for future reference or for just expanding the research afterwards, even to other people. So indeed, stakeholders first, but overall availability.
Thank you. Danny.
I think one of the biggest challenges in sound in game production, like in general, is to find time, like to have the time in the schedule, being at the like in the production cycle, being one at the end of the cycle, like because sound is always comes at the end, when when like everything is set. And the second one is sound being more abstract. So in some cases, in some cases, it's not immediately clear. It's not immediately clear where sound is needed, or what, or how it's needed, or the attention that it's needed. And I think, like, for the first the first 2 years, I think it's like from talking to people, I think it's like an ongoing thing with, like, ongoing battle of any sound person in any production, like explaining how important sound is, and like what fundamental role also sound plays in the experience. Which, like I know this was the last question, but I see like the very last question that is super good is like, have your decision in sound somehow affected game designing in altering animations, like mechanics, animations, and so forth? This is very, very interesting, because personally, this is a area that I'm very passionate about, and basically the marriage between game design, game mechanics, and sound, and how those things intertwine, and basically when the mechanics also come from the sound. To answer the question is yes, but like we don't have time to go into length of like all those things. But like as a general rule, what I find fascinating is, for example, when the design has the sound embedded, like when the design process has the sound embedded on it, there's some design decisions that might have been like, not might have, but that derive from the sound, because every single virtual world, every single game needs to define how sound works in that world, and those rules and those definitions really vary from game to game, and it's really a design decision on a mechanical level, like what does the function of sound in the world. Like in Zelda, you have like how much sound you're emitting. In a lot of stealth games, you have like special modes, and like you see the sound. If you throw a pebble, and like the guards will go check it out. So like all of those mechanics and all those interactions derive from the physicality of the sound in the world. And like this is what I find fascinating, pushing the envelope in more different interactions with the game mechanics and the sound.
Yeah, it's really, I call it sound design as a component of game design. It's not separate, especially now with 3D virtual audio objects and things like that, and binaural and VR. I think that's becoming more and more the case. So anyways, you managed to sneak in another question. Thank you so much for doing that. Clever. That was clever. Okay, so to wrap things up, first, I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Danny Kogan and Giorgio Vezzini of Larian Studios from Quebec City, for taking the time to talk with us here today. So much appreciated to hear what you have to say. and get your insight on everything. And honestly, I'm looking at these questions. I think we could just go till you have, your throats hurt as far as talking goes. There's so many great questions. I want to thank everybody who has attended here today for all the awesome questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I tried to give everybody the most opportunity based on how the topic was going. Save those ones for next time. So in conclusion, I would like to say again, thank you very much. And I want all of you to have an awesome day. So take care.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for having us.
Indeed. Thanks so much. It was such a pleasure. Indeed.
Great to meet you both.